Action, take two. We were about 30 minutes into this, and now we're gonna have to restart again. So today we are doing Exercised by Daniel Lieberman, and Daniel Lieberman was the guy who did Molecule of More, which was one of our very first book summaries and recordings that we did. Exercise is all about, it's all about why we shouldn't have to exercise, which is a bit weird when you see the title. And we were saying earlier that it was a big surprise because we thought the book would be specifically around trying to convince us to exercise, if that makes sense, or why we should exercise. But the reality was somewhat different, and it was more sort of arguing against the necessity of exercising, but arguing for the necessity of an active life, or a physically active life. And yeah, like we said earlier, it was a book that took us both by surprise, and we think we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we'll see, he tries to demystify a bunch of myths that we all hold about physical activity, that we evolved to engage in, we evolved to do fitness, but actually that's not quite the case, is it? We evolved to do physical activity because of the necessities of finding food and reproducing and finding shelter, all those kinds of things. Rather than, now in a modern lifestyle, we've kind of solved all those problems, and yet our bodies still require physical activity, and hence why we go out and we engage, directly to do, we go to a gym and run on a treadmill, not going anywhere, because our bodies still need to be able to engage in physical activity.
And without it, we can't, maintain in good shape, etc. And obviously it causes, as we will find out later, lots of medical issues. So just to really quickly here, the weirdness of treadmills as a concept encapsulates the main theme of this book. We never evolved to exercise. But what does Daniel Lieberman mean by this statement? Essentially, exercise is now widely understood as a voluntary physical activity carried out to promote health and fitness. However, this understanding is relatively new. Our ancestors, who were mainly hunter-gatherers and farmers, had to engage in physical activity for hours each day to obtain sufficient food. Although they occasionally engaged in leisure activities like dancing and playing, they never engaged in running or walking several miles solely for the purpose of maintaining their health. And I thought there was a rather telling part in this book where he spoke to one of the tribe members that we're going to go on to later, and I don't know whether it was the Hadza or the Tyramura. I'm going to be forever butchering the two. But it was based upon the Born to Run book, I believe, and he was speaking to the guy who basically ran an ultra marathon with no training, and we'll talk about this later. But the guy, when he explained the whole concept of running on a treadmill, he kind of was like, why would you run for no reason? Why would you? Because he didn't see any reason in terms of maintaining health, because for them, maintaining health, that isn't even a concept. They maintain their health just through the fact they're physically active each day. So to them, us running on our treadmill, not moving anywhere, is just such a weird concept. They couldn't quite get their heads around it. And I thought that's quite interesting when you've been culturally indoctrinated, when, hunter-gatherer, somebody outside of your culture looks at it and goes, what the hell are they doing and why? And it makes you question the sort of, it's stuff you've never really heard of. You'd be like, of course I'm running on a treadmill. Why wouldn't I run on a treadmill? You're going nowhere. It's oh yeah, you're right. I'm not actually going anywhere. Oh, I'm trying to maintain my health. But why are you trying to maintain your health? Because, because I don't actually get enough activity in through, my lifestyle. Yeah,
no, exactly. And I think what you said just there, that there's no, why would you do it for no reason? And, when you look at these hunter-gatherers, when they engage in physical activity, most of the time, like we said, it's about going out to get food. Okay, so that's their reason, that's their necessity. Now, we don't have to do that in a modern lifestyle. But when they engage in other kinds of physical activity outside of the kind of meeting the necessities, there's another reason. It's either it's fun, it's dance, right? And it has a spiritual meaning to it. And so there are these added levels which we kind of don't engage with so much, because we're not even meeting the necessity of engaging in physical activity for health wise, because we don't live as of an active lifestyle. Right. And so almost that needs to be our first benchmark. And then if we're also meeting that, then, we engage in other kind of stuff as well. But I just thought that was quite interesting. It's like,
yeah. I was going to add, I think it's quite interesting, this idea of medicalization that we'll talk about later, where, everything's kind of been prescribed a sort of dosage to help health, because we do studies based on health, all right? And then we end up with these like dosage requirements, such as 10,000 steps a day, 5 fruit and veg. I know it's slightly not related to the exercise stuff, but it's the same idea. It's like we've been now given like an average dose by like a medical society or research group that's basically decided, this is how much you should be having.
Yeah.
And that's kind of framed our discussion around things. They don't have these random 10,000 steps a day in their mind. These tribes are just out there just trying to catch food, get their water, etc. And for them, they don't see any other need to be physically active other than the necessities of living their lives. Whereas obviously we have a more sedentary life. And we've realized that actually this sedentary life is causing health problems, and therefore it's been medicalized, and we've now got dosages to hit. And that's kind of what we see it as these days. It's you can even argue, most time you said earlier you're on a the stepping machine, you're like above everybody looking down at people running on treadmills going nowhere. Not many of them are very happy or look very happy on those treadmills, And I have to say, I don't remember. I personally enjoy it because I know you do the same, where you set yourself goals and targets to beat. So, when you're on a treadmill, you're trying to beat your previous best. And I find it quite rewarding in that sense. But, the actual doing of the running, like the actual running on the treadmill, isn't exactly a fun activity to do. It's not exactly enjoyable. And that's part of his thesis in this book is like, we haven't evolved to enjoy exercise. Like, it was just something that we already did through our active lifestyles, and therefore we didn't actually have a need. We don't need to exercise, or we didn't have a need to exercise. We have a need to be physically active, and it's a difference.
And that's what I was
like.
I was just gonna say that's what I was kind of getting at, the whole reasons why hunter-gatherers engage in physical activity above and beyond their like basic day to day, right? And it's because there's that other reason to of either doing something for fun or because of a spiritual reason or tradition. That's why they engage in it, but otherwise they wouldn't, right? They wouldn't. Why would they unnecessarily expend calories? I love that framework.
And
we'll get onto that later. But why would they do that? The only reason they would do that is for another reason, another layer, and that's either being fun or traditional.
I was going to say there's no other bigger reason than survival first and foremost, right? And then it's funny, isn't it? Because I would say he does talk a lot about how they have like you said, rituals and like parties, play, dancing, etc. But I bet you they didn't do the dancing stuff after a big day of running around trying to catch prey.
Probably not.
It's more something they do on maybe the more sedentary days, if that makes sense.
And I think just on that point, I think we've got to this kind of reductionist medicalization of exercise because as we have evolved as a society and our day-to-day activities have, or the level of activity that we engage in on a daily basis has dwindled. We've had to literally focus in and narrow in on, okay, well, what level of physical activity do I need to stay healthy? And it's almost forced us to this kind of like reductionist point, by solving all these problems, you can get your food delivered. You don't have to go out and catch it yourself, And it's just interesting that we're now at this point.
Water's a big one too in my head as well.
Water's huge,
Think about it. You would have to in the past find flowing water, right? Like, because obviously everybody, or at least this is another myth that could be busted. But I thought stagnant water has a chance of obviously being bad because obviously it's had time to like fester and grow bacteria, etc. Right? So days would be you'd be doing daily treks to fetch water, right? And you probably have buckets and stuff, but then you'd have to carry the buckets back to your tribe, right? So there was plenty of opportunities for walking long distances, being active, carrying weight, putting load through your body. Is it this book? I think he does talk about it later on about like osteoporosis and stuff like with bone issues to do with not putting enough load through your legs, and how there's been myths around actually putting too much load is a problem, but it's not actually the issue. But we'll get onto that. So we did say this on the last time we recorded this, but Lieberman takes a different approach to the way he looks at these health studies. So many of the current studies are epidemiological, god damn it, I hate that word, meaning they investigate correlations between health and physical activity in large groups of individuals. For example, hundreds of studies have explored connections between heart disease, exercise habits, and factors such as age, gender, and income. It's crucial to note that these analyses only reveal correlations and not causation. However, Lieberman utilizes evolutionary and anthropological viewpoints to challenge and reconsider numerous of the myths that we have regarding physical inactivity, activity, and exercise, as well as trying to answer the following questions. So, are humans naturally inclined to exercise? Is sitting as harmful as smoking? Does poor posture lead to health problems? I thought that was a really interesting one as well, because he debunks a few things on that. So, is 8 hours of sleep a necessity? Are humans relatively slow and weak? Does walking fail to aid in weight loss? Does running damage your knees? Is it normal to exercise less as we age? And what is the best method to persuade people to exercise? Oh, sorry. And the last one, is there an ideal form and amount of exercises? And yeah, like we said earlier, pretty much most chapters try and answer one or two of these questions. And absolutely. By the end of this podcast, you should have an answer to all these. So yeah, we'll jump straight into the chapter 1, which is, are we born to rest or run? With the myth number 1 being debunked is we evolved to exercise. And this book talks about the idea of this like natural human. So I got here this note about the John Jacques Rousseau's, savage. I think a lot of people use this, or the left-leaning like political people lean on this a lot, where this idea that the sort of natural human is untainted by, culture, naturally kind, outgoing, etc. Like the perfect human, is the more natural human, right? And you were saying earlier that sort of logic, sometimes you use like, what would somebody in the past be doing now? And albeit that gets you so far, but it's, as later on we'll discover, the natural human is also quite a violent human as well. Like it has the best of both worlds. It has a bit of violence and obviously cooperation. It's the yin and yang. It's the good and evil within us all. And then he takes this one step further and calls it, Lieberman calls it the athletic savage. And it's this myth that, people who live in more tribal environments or hunter-gatherers, people who live in hunter-gathering society right now are extremely athletic in comparison to us. And actually, that is the natural state we were meant to be. We are now all weak because of our sedentary lifestyles. And that all these, hunter-gatherers who are living in remote areas are like the complete athlete package, and would put us all to shame. And what he mentioned as well is a lot of the popularity of the book Born to Run around where basically a bunch of hunter-gatherers can run the length of 2 marathons, off the back of not exercising or training for it. Whereas obviously in this day and age, when people run a marathon, let alone, back-to-back marathons, they spend months training for these events. These guys could just do it, on a whim. And it basically what it's done is it's put this like idea in the public consciousness of the fact that these people who live in nature or live a more natural life, so to speak, are incredible athletes. And as we'll find out later as well, so not just height, I just want to add it now because I thought it was really interesting. We also thought they'd be stronger as well, and it turns out they're not, which is really interesting. That was the point of this chapter.
No, exactly. And I think, like you're saying, I use that kind of logical reasoning to guide some of my actions because I have this perception of how a hunter-gatherer would have acted. And I think I'm fully aware of that our Western civilization offers a lot, but it also isn't always great. And so sometimes I try to kind of eradicate that to try and thinking about how would I have acted if blah, blah. But I think if my perception isn't calibrated or it isn't updated, then I'm essentially using, the wrong guide, and I think it's just quite interesting. Some of the things that he brings up about, like you said, previously when we weren't recording this, that we have this idea that chimps were 10 times stronger than they actually are, and that they could rip a man's arm off, and that's not the case. Or that, Neanderthals used to be really, really strong and brutish, and that really isn't the case either. And it's these having a more updated perception of how these people would have acted, I think helps us. And that's kind of what he does throughout this book. And like you said,
I want to add on
I
that
think,
one point. Sorry, continue one second. I was going to go out on about the bears, because you know how like Americans think they can beat up bears, and the fact that bears are like 3 times the speed. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen that stuff. Have I not told you about the study where they asked Americans like what you could beat in a fight, and they just obviously just thought they could all beat up loads of different animals that they couldn't. Like they thought they
fucking
like
bear.
9% of them thought they could. And also, by the way, this is beat up like with like bare hands, so it's not even like with a weapon. It's like they could bare hand brawl a bear.
Oh my god!
And then sorry, the only reason I'm saying that is because obviously there's things this book does which debunks the strengths of like chimps or whatever. But what I found really interesting, I sent it to you, remember it, was the speed of animals compared to humans.
Yeah,
and a bear is like double the speed of Usain Bolt, and you just look at it, and you go, yeah, oh, Jesus.
Fuck.
If you think you can run away from that thing, you are mistaken.
Absolutely no way.
Sorry,
way.
but you're in a trail of thought there, and I've just
it's valid. No, but I was just going to touch on that point that you were talking about how. So Daniel Lieberman basically went to one of these hunter-gatherer tribes. I think it was the Hadza, and they were doing this kind of spiritual event where 2 groups of people had to run and kick a ball, and they had to go back and forth. I can't remember how long the distance was, but overall it ended up being like 70 miles over 24 hours. And you're right, like people will look at that and be like, oh, they were just they woke up and they could just do that, and they just evolved to be like that, and we've kind of, so we should be able to do that. But the fact is it neglects the fact that every day they're doing about 10 miles of physical activity to be able to reach the necessities and tick off, the fact that they went and got food today, or they went and got water. And it's, I think that's very important. I think it was good that he kind of started with that, because it changes.
100%. Yeah. So I do think it was the Tarahumara tribe, because I got this note here. So I only because this note here wouldn't make sense otherwise. So it's, how do some Tarahumara manage to run several back-to-back marathons without training, while Iron Men practice and prepare obsessively for years to accomplish similar feats of endurance? While it's true that the Tarahumara and other non-industrial people don't follow a structured exercise routine, they do, however, engage in hours of physical labor every day as part of their daily existence. They walk many miles on rugged terrain and perform manual tasks like plowing, digging, and carrying, since they lack modern labor-saving devices. When researchers attached accelerometers to over 20 Tarahumara men, they found that they walked on average 10 miles per day. Therefore, that training enables them to run back-to-back marathons. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like, you're building up this like workload where if you're walking, roughly, 10 miles a day, and I bet some of that's maybe in light jog as well. I don't know. You're building up some level of resistance to your body, or like endurance within your body. And I can't remember later on if they got into the fiber density of these tribe people. I don't know if they were allowed to do that, and I don't think they did. But you know how they do like biopsies these days, where they take samples of people's like legs and then work out how much percentage is slow twitch and fast twitch. It'd be interesting to see, obviously, if they put so much demand through the endurance. You would assume they would have a lot of slow twitch fibers, or be predominantly slow twitch. But yeah.
No, that is really interesting. And I remember, so what we were talking about prior to recording was that, realistically, if you're, somewhat active, you could run a marathon. Like, I'm not training to run a marathon at the moment, but I probably could do it. It's just, it wouldn't be a good time. And I was kind of emphasizing the point that, when this tribe, when they ran back and forth over 70 miles, they weren't trying to beat some new world record. They weren't trying to get it within a certain time. There was a competition between 2 groups, but they weren't trying to reach a certain time. And I think that's something that people need to take into consideration. Like, you are physically evolved, unless you're not very active, to be able to do it. It's just you wouldn't be able to do it in like a very quick time, which a lot of the time when we engage in physical activity today, there always has to be a benchmark that we hit. But actually that doesn't need to be the case. But I
do think there is a level of, I think we probably would be able to complete a marathon if you sort of, for example, walked it. I'm not going to say it would be very comfortable. I think most people, especially live a very, very sedentary life, it would be very uncomfortable. And I guess part of the reason why these guys can do it as well is, one, there's a spiritual reason they're doing it for, like I believe it's like some sort of spiritual event they did once a year or something like that. well, I guess obviously the workload they do every day probably makes it more bearable for them. I would assume they probably do feel pretty sore afterwards, but they won't be feeling the level of soreness if you've never been doing 10 miles a day for 365 days a year.
Exactly.
They build up an extensive amount of mileage under their legs, so I can imagine for them it's it is intense, but it's just it's like a small drop of what they do yearly. So I just thought that was a really interesting difference. And in this next bit, you got about the analyzing the Hadger. So I believe this is the one as well he went to. And if I remember correctly, the whole point of this was that they actually don't, or they live a more sedentary life than we thought. So like we have this idea of the mythical, like sort of savage, like we're saying. So we're kind of arguing two things here. We're saying they do more physical activity, which they do, but at the same time, they also are more sedentary than we think. We think they were always constantly doing stuff, always walking somewhere, which, I mean, obviously they walk more, but there is parts of their day where they just relax, right? And it was quite an interesting idea because sometimes when I do think as well of this idea of the savage, they're like constantly on the move, never stopping, these unbeatable, machines that never stop.
Yeah.
But the reality is actually they spend a lot of their time, he said, doing the classic human, sitting, gossiping, chatting, that sort of thing.
And I think what's really important to note, and what I was like fascinated, and I almost want to start doing this, is that when they are sedentary, they are still somewhat active. So he was talking about how a lot of them will basically squat, right? Or they'll be engaging in certain muscles, even when they're sat down. So they're not like slouched over. And I thought that was fascinating. The idea that they're still somewhat active, even when they're sedentary compared to, Western man. I almost want to start instead of sitting down, just squatting all the time. And just
start doing it when you go to the loo, mate. Squat.
Just
that's it. So the Japanese do that or something. Sorry, I'm going to quickly read this note here as well. So in one study, 46 Hadza adults wore heart rate monitors for several days, and the results showed that they spent an average of 3 hours and 40 minutes a day engaged in light activities and 2 hours and 40 minutes a day in moderate or vigorous activities. Although they're about 12 times more active than the average American or European, their workload cannot be described as strenuous, which I thought was quite interesting as well. So they never really are, doing that hardcore sort of. You could even possibly argue that when Westerners or the more modern industrialized societies do exercise, they probably are more strenuous than what these guys are putting themselves through, because we are like, the goal almost is to be strenuous, right? Because we're trying to like fit a lot of activity within a small time frame, because that's all we have time for, right? So the intensity tends to be higher, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this next note as well about this physical activity levels across humanity. So I'd never come across this PAL framework, or have you?
Yeah, no, I don't think I have. Like I don't think I've ever heard of it as like PAL. PAL, like the acronym. Yeah. I know the concept, but So do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it? Yeah. So assuming that what hunter-gatherers do is evolutionary normal, comprehensive studies of contemporary foraging populations from Africa, Asia, and the Americas suggest that a typical human workday used to last about 7 hours. This workday consisted mostly of light activities with at most an hour of vigorous activities. Although there is variation from group to group and season to season, most hunter-gatherers engage in moderate levels of physical effort, some of which is done while sitting. How different is this normal level of physical activity from that of post-industrial people, such as farmers like the Tarahumara, factory workers, and others whose lives have been transformed by civilization, including me and possibly you? So the PAL, so the PAL, or physical activity level, is determined by dividing the energy you expend during a 24-hour period by the amount of energy needed to maintain your body if you were in bed all day. This measurement is not influenced by differences in body size, making it impartial. Which is I think that's quite interesting, and how they apply it. So hunter-gatherers typically have PALs of 1.9 for men and 1.8 for women, slightly lower than subsistence farmers, whose PALs average 2.1 for men and 1.9 for women. To provide perspective, the PALs of hunter-gatherers is similar to those of factory workers and farmers in the developed world. and about 15% higher than powers of individuals with sedentary desk jobs in developed countries. Thus, the physical activity levels of typical hunter-gatherers are comparable to those of Americans or Europeans.
It's actually really interesting. 15% is quite a lot. It's more than I thought, because when I first read this, obviously you see the 1.9, you see the 1.6, you're like, 0.3 difference. But obviously now in that perspective, it's actually quite a lot different. Like now looking at it, I'm like, okay, now I understand why it's a bigger deal than I thought when I first read it. Because when I first read that, I was like, what's the deal? It's almost the same. But the reality is, obviously, it's not quite.
It's no, exactly.
Quite the same.
It is worth noting that most wild mammals have powers of 3.3 or higher, which is almost twice as high as that of hunter-gatherers. Therefore, humans who must forage and gather their food and create all their possessions by hand are significantly less active than the average free-ranging mammal.
I love that point. I thought it was crazy to think that all animals burn almost double, and it kind of reiterates this point that actually we're like energy misers. Like we don't actually like expending energy. We're like very efficient with our energy expenditures in comparison. There's plenty of adaptations we have that have allowed us to have great endurance, such as I didn't realize that we will talk about later, but about the sweat glands. I don't know if you found that interesting too. About how animals don't actually sweat, or they don't have as many sweat glands, and most animals reduce heat through their panting and their tongues, and then they can't run a certain pace because then they can't pant, and therefore they can't reduce heat, and that's why they can't do endurance. I was like, that's absolutely crazy. I didn't realize that. And then I was I've never picked up a sweaty dog, and I was like, that's a good point. I've seen dogs run around, and never picked up a sweaty one.
And they're oily if they do sweat. It is really interesting. And I think we're just thinking about it now, you can draw parallels. We've been talking about it for weeks with habits, right? But how we are misers with cognitive energy. We're exactly the same with expending any kind of energy, whether that be physical as well. And this just goes to show you, right? As in we have kind of evolved to be able to hold on to preserve calories or energy until we really need it. And we're not motivated to just throw it away, because that wouldn't be wise. Let's just put it that way. So in conclusion, I believe two generalizations can be made about human exercise. Firstly, while sports have been popular among young people throughout history, non-sport related exercise was not common until recent times. Secondly, with modern advancements in technology and changes in society, physical activity is no longer as necessary for people in industrialized societies. As a result, many experts have become increasingly concerned about the lack of physical activity among the general population.
I just think this whole myth, the first myth that's just been debunked, which is being born to exercise or evolved to exercise, is just getting the classic getting the definitions wrong. We have evolved to exercise in the sense we've evolved to move. And that's basically the point here. We've evolved to be physically active. We haven't,
and that's the difference: physical activity and fitness, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we confuse the two. But exercise, I guess, is what he's saying is voluntary physical activity. So basically, his point is we haven't evolved to want to do physical activity.
Absolutely,
it's something that it was involuntary physical activity that we evolved to do. And I guess think it's the same for all animals, right? As well, he kind of makes that point. It's all animals, you never see. I can't remember if you made a good point, but saying you never see horses just running laps, just trying to get fit. I know you didn't have the cognitive capacity. You don't see any other animal trying to, be physically active for no reason. There's always
these bears working out to beat up these Americans.
You see them doing press ups or something.
No, it's so true, because the main problem, right, is that they need to be able to survive to reproduce. That is what we are programmed to do. If you tick off those boxes, then you can go to the next stages. But until you can do that, then
self-actualization.
Exactly. And I was actually thinking about this. It is interesting, because I wonder whether, and this might sound just incredibly ignorant, but whether hunter-gatherers could almost get to that point because they would have to direct a lot of their energy to solving problems which would occur every day, right? Finding water, finding food. I was just thinking about that earlier on. But on this note, I think people can interpret hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle activity as they want to do that, They want to go and run. They go for a run, even though it's like, it's incorrect. And so they think that they have the motivation to just be able to, or they've evolved to have the motivation to just go to the gym and do it, when that doesn't really work like that.
Yeah.
I think that's
I was even going to say something like, you could almost argue just by the fact we've created the tools to reduce the workload. So the idea of creating tools to farm, I mean, albeit you can say maybe they did it so they could feed more people, but maybe you could also argue they did it so there'd be less work on the farm. That in my head shows the motivation to not want to do the exercise. Like we've actually actively throughout history just basically looked at everything that takes effort to do and gone, how can we reduce the effort? Washing machines, everything, everything involves, throwing stuff in a tub, pressing a button now instead of, actually hand washing stuff. So you could even argue that there is a massive, motive within us that, we want to avoid expending this energy so much, that's built into us so much that's why we've created all these solutions to the eggs. And then it's all come full circle to us and we've realized, oh shit, we've done all these changes and now we're worse off for it. And we need to actually be active.
That's really interesting because I'm just thinking about habits here. What's the main thing that you need to change? Well, the ability, the ease of ability, right? Yeah. If you can make something as easy as possible, and that's literally how we just view everything. It's like, how can I make this easier? I don't want to expend more energy than necessary.
How most inventions have happened, most things we take for granted, like even like a cup is technically an invention to make it easier to drink water.
Yeah.
Or
to carry agriculture has come about.
To consume, obviously, you'd be like a dog, wouldn't you? Like every time you'd be like in a puddle, like trying to lick up the water. And that's funny because their tongues are literally built, obviously, to. Have you seen it? They scoop it. They scoop the water up.
Like a bowl. Yeah.
Like we literally don't have that ability, so that just shows over time we've obviously had to drink from some form of like something where we can just put it straight in the mouth, right? It's just quite an interesting idea that
fascinating.
So that was the first chapter, running. And then we got chapter 2. So inactivity and the importance of being lazy. So myth number 2, it is unnatural to be indolent. And that's unnatural to be lazy. I thought that was a pretty pretentious way of saying it. I mean, does indolent even mean that? I assume it does. Indolent.
Yeah, there'll probably be a slight variation.
Wanting to, it is, yeah. So wanting to avoid activity, brackets lazy.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, so this is interesting because what we were basically just saying there is we've, at the end of that chapter, we were just talking about how we've obviously invented a load of things to reduce effort. So almost by proxy, we were saying, we're trying to design our lives so we can be more lazy. And it's quite interesting because once again, this, the core idea of this like athletic savage comes back again. This we were born to, like we said before, be so physically fit we could run marathons. We were born to be so motivated that we just want to run around like crazy people all the time. Well, not want to, but it was part of like the human drive, is to move and stuff like that. Where this is kind of saying actually we evolved to be, like we were saying earlier, lazy or trying to save as much energy as possible. Let's start with the chimpanzees. So when chimpanzees travel on the forest floor, it can be a challenge to keep up with them, but they spend most of their day either feeding or digesting. Chimpanzees typically devote about half their waking hours to filling their stomachs with highly fibrous food, and for much of the rest of the day, they rest, digest, groom each other, and take long naps. On an average day, they climb only about 100 meters and walk just 2 to 3 miles. To be sure, chimpanzees are highly social animals and they occasionally fight, copulate, and do other exciting things. But most of the time, our closest ape relatives are sluggards that live life in a sort of perpetual Sabbath. I thought it was quite interesting. Obviously, as the most genetically, common, the most genetically similar animal in the animal kingdom, and how they live a lot. It sounds like their life, doesn't it?
Yeah. Do you want to know something crazy that I found out at uni? That we are closer related to chimpanzees than chimpanzees are related to gorillas.
Oh, really?
How weird is that?
That's actually crazy. That's crazy.
That's nuts, right? Like that just blew my mind when I read that. Crazy.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna have to get onto some of the gene books because there's a lot of talk I think in the sports gene, which we're going to review next, where he goes a lot into genetics, and for me it still goes over my head because I don't really get how it all works. So compared to most mammals, including humans, a mile of walking requires more than twice the energy for a typical chimpanzee. Since walking is so expensive in terms of calories, apes are naturally driven to use as little energy as possible while moving around the forest, allowing them to allocate more to reproduction. Therefore, apes evolved to be adapted to a sedentary lifestyle. And I thought this was quite interesting. And I think we will go on in a minute to this sort of idea about the, calorie trade-off and how your body can only use the 1 calorie once, right? So it has to be careful what it selects for you to do, because obviously there's not an infinite supply of calories, apart from in modern society where there is.
No, but that's a good point. And I thought what was interesting about this chapter is that he kind of touched on, obviously how your environment affects how you evolve, right? So when he was talking about chimpanzees, he was saying that, they have fruits and they have vegetables that they kind of eat, but it's actually pretty close. They don't need to go that far. And so hence why they've evolved to be like more sedentary. And then
I assume
they do have energy.
I assume they create like areas of like areas where they live. I trying to think of like there's a word for like territory, right? They create their own territories based upon probably these things, and they probably don't ever move from these territories, whereas humans are like seen to be, not necessarily, but seen to be more natural, like explorers, like they move. If that makes sense.
And like because naturally environments change. I think about the ice age and all that kind of thing. You would have had to evolve to try and find food elsewhere, and so you'd evolve certain mechanisms such as being able to walk and not expend as much energy as, for instance, chimpanzees, to be able to find food. And I thought that was just quite interesting because it shows you how how our environment shapes us. So on to this point. So hunter-gatherers like the Hadza, while not engaging in intense physical labor and often being inactive for several hours during the day, are still more active than apes, who make them seem like workaholics. This is particularly interesting as humans evolved from ape-like ancestors, similar to chimpanzees and gorillas, which implies that it is the modern sedentary lifestyle of humans that is an anomaly. The discovery poses several questions about why non-industrial humans are less active than wild apes, despite being relatively more active. However, before answering this question, it is necessary to examine what happens in our bodies and how much energy we expend while at rest, which requires laboratory investigations.
So we could go into the details of this, how this energy expenditure works here, but I think the main takeaway here, which I got from this, is that our sort of default metabolic rate, so like the amount of energy we burn without actually doing any activity, is so high that even if we do loads of activity, it's still more. So like maintaining our body is more costly than any activity we could possibly do, which I thought was so interesting, because that's mad to think that just keeping us like glued together requires more energy than anything we could possibly do activity wise.
Because we think of like doing things directly, right, like moving and everything like that, but we forget about all the systems that are, and all the processes that are going on in our body just to keep us awake and digesting and all these things. And I thought what was really interesting about this point was that he was talking about, so you have basal metabolic rate, and that's what the amount of calories you burn while you're asleep. So while you're literally doing absolutely nothing, but so you burn a certain amount, and your body has an optimal amount that it goes for. But if you are like starving or you haven't eaten, then it will reduce some of the processes it does while you're sleeping to just what it needs, right? But really what it wants to do is it wants to have an optimal amount. But it was just so interesting to see that there is a certain amount of calories that we need to burn because there are certain processes that are so important while we sleep. But it would be ideal if we could burn a bit more just to have the optimal amount, right? So that all processes are functioning properly. And I thought that was really interesting, because then that explains why, we want to be sedentary during the day, because we want to be able to save some of those some of those calories for when we process it at night.
And I think it's really interesting because we'll go straight on to this study on starvation. So if I remember it correctly from the book, it was something to do with starvation post World War I, or it might have been World War II. Can you remember exactly which one it was?
I think, because I think it was to do with Stalin, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
after.
Yeah. So basically, a bunch of people who were starving. Yeah, they they agreed to basically starve themselves for a certain amount of time, right? And then they were getting all these sort of body measures done during this period of time. So the individuals who volunteered for a scientific study in which they starved themselves were able to survive because of their body's capacity to adapt by utilizing less energy even when at rest. Over the course of 24 weeks, the volunteers' resting and basal metabolic rates dropped by 40%, a transformation that was not easily observable. So you said that's just absolutely crazy. Your body can just drop itself by 40%.
40%, like that's fucking crazy, right?
Yeah. So basically the point here is the essential takeaway from this experiment is that the human resting metabolisms are adaptable. Resting metabolism represents the amount the body spends on maintenance rather than what it is required to spend. One of the primary ways in which the volunteers reduced their energy expenditure was by cutting back on maintenance processes that help maintain the body's balance. So their heart rates dropped by 1/3 and their body temperatures decreased from their normal 98.6 Fahrenheit to 95.8, making them feel constantly cold, even in rooms when they were adequately heated. I thought that's quite an interesting point because I do think I made the notes later, but I did touch on it a minute ago, which is the idea that you only get each calorie once and your body has to choose where to send it. And therefore, it will prioritize based upon what it sees the need for. And stuff like you're saying here, like your body temperature, if it thinks it can survive, because maybe it knows the outside temperature isn't actually that cold and you're not in a freezing environment, right? It will just drop your body temperature because it's like, okay, fine, you can survive in it. So we won't spend those calories on this. We'll spend it on something which is keeping you alive. And I just thought that's so fascinating that your body has these decision procedures in it. I don't know how it decides, but it's just crazy to think that that's going on at all times. Like a decision making matrix. Something's going on to be like, okay, right, where's this going? Where's this going? Where's this going? And it makes sense because your cells technically, when oxygen comes in, it's like, okay, we give it to the red blood cells, right? It's stuff's always going on. Like this is going there, this is going there. It's just like, how does it decide? It's kind of crazy.
And on that note, like I remember, so I watched that. Was it Chris Hemsworth's documentary or something about, it's called Limitless. I think it was about him getting older and basically different areas of fitness that he needs to focus on. Anyway, one of them he was fasting, and by the idea is that by day 4 or 5, think about your body has a certain amount of calories, and like you just said, it needs to distribute it accordingly. And apparently by day 4 or 5, suddenly you have really heightened senses. You suddenly feel quite strong. And the idea is that if you were going out, if you hadn't eaten for a while and you need food, then your body is almost distributing it towards the mechanisms that are responsible for finding food, right? So being really alert, being able
what if it makes you super aggressive, reduces your prefrontal cortex and channels all that energy it's why people become cannibals, on remote islands, is because they suddenly lose all prefrontal cortex control. They go super Hulk mode, and they just start trying to pull off each other's limbs.
It wouldn't surprise me if they were actually engaging in battle in that one period, but then you'd be fucking exhausted afterwards. You wouldn't be able, and that's the thing is a lot of the time when people fast, you have to be careful about when you engage in physical activity, because afterwards, you've only got a certain amount of calories and now that's going, right?
That's an interesting idea. It does make sense, obviously, after a prolonged period of fasting, and it's sort of all battle stations ahead, one last gasp, one last attempt at hunting. Let's put all the all the energy resources into the muscles. This is what I mean. Then it stops going to your brain, so all of a sudden you're just an absolute crazy rabid person trying to eat anything that moves. It wouldn't become more animalistic. It wouldn't surprise me if you end up in that mode. It would make sense. Evolutionary, the full defense mode. This, you need to survive.
You're not allowed to think anymore.
Because think about it. One of the brain's most cognitive, energy expensive
consumes
parts
20%
of the body, right?
exactly.
So it might as well just shut off that prefrontal cortex, because it doesn't need that to breathe, to move your muscles, right? It's just let's remove any sort of constraint you had around society, and let's sort yourself out. And I don't know. I've never been in the situation where I'm around people who've been starved for 20 days, but I reckon they'll probably try to eat pretty quick.
Bloody hell, that's true.
Okay. And then I made a note here about, as you read this text, you're using approximately 60 calories per hour, equivalent to energy in a typical orange. And this is tending to various bodily functions such as your brain, liver, muscles, kidneys, intestines, and more. yeah,
I think it just is really interesting to, to understand your basal metabolic rate, your resting metabolic rate, and your active metabolic rate, right? Because it just goes to show, like, if you understand how much you burn when you're asleep, while you're sedentary, and then while you're active, it just gives you a better overall amount, right?
And I think what's quite interesting here is obviously everybody talks about this idea that, people who are thinner have higher metabolisms. And this is basically like, it kind of makes sense that somebody who could just take more energy obviously doesn't put on weight as easy, because they're constantly burning all their resources. They're like a firecracker, like all the time. They're just constantly churning through resources.
And I was thinking about this.
There must be massive variation because, the bit on the sleep, which I'll get onto in a minute, how he talks about this massive variation within humanity of sleeping patterns. There must be massive variety on metabolic rates within humanity. And I find it so weird how we still do this medicalization, whereas like we talked about it before, like personalized medicine. Like it makes sense to have different dosages and different requirements for different people because their bodies are just different. There is so much variety within humanity itself. It's impossible to just be like, oh, this one size fits all. You should get 10,000 steps. But if you're a bloody metabolic firecracker, like you're literally burning so much energy, you don't need to. Some people literally are lucky enough. They probably don't need to do that. They'll probably be fine as is because they just burn so much fucking energy all the time. And then the opposite is people who don't have that.
Yeah. But this is what I found interesting. Like, so does that mean then if, like, let's say someone is burning through loads of calories, does that mean that their processes or whatever, mechanisms require it during sleep, whereas other people who don't, who are maybe larger or don't have as good of a basal metabolic rate, just don't require burning that stuff? That's what I find quite interesting because it's almost like two sides of the coin, right?
Piqued my interest, and I think actually people are listening. We're going to go on to some of the stuff like metabolical, which is to do with like how our processed foods are metabolized by our bodies. But I would love to read a book on metabolism as well, and just understand the most recent and latest science on like how that all works. So we definitely had to find something off the back of this for it because I think it's super interesting. I mean, like you said, even just understand what your basal metabolic rate, like, we get given these like average, this is how many calories you should have a day, this is how many protein you should have a day. But it's like, well, it really depends on your body, right? Like if my basal metabolic rate or like my base is just way higher than somebody else's, I need to eat more. And, I feel like me and you probably have something along those lines because we struggle to put on weight to some degree. And I think with age, obviously that changes. But there's got to be something there, and I'd just be interested to know for myself. Just
because then it's also like, well, do your genes dictate how much metabolism is required for the processes in place?
Yeah,
right. Or how many calories are required? Like, if you have a different variation of a certain gene, will that mean that you need to burn more or less calories for whatever that gene is responsible for? Right.
I'm trying to remember if there is a point in this book where he talks about it, but it could have been in the sports gene, but he talks about this idea that we actually have a total amount of energy that we should use a day. I don't know if it is this book, a constrained energy expenditure. There's like a theory that actually we have like a range that we spend. And even if we work out, we basically, like we were sort of talking earlier, our body adapts. So if we work out and just expend loads more calories, our body would just shut off calories from another area and just give it to this one. And then basically the point being, we actually only ever burn a certain, like there is a range of calories that we burn a day, no matter what. We'll just stop doing other bodily processes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite an interesting idea, which basically means we don't have an unlimited supply of calories, because if you think about it, if you just properly went at it, there's got to be an upper range. I can't remember if it's this book or the sports gene, but we'll get onto it if it is later in this book.
Yeah.
So the next note is actually what we were just talking about. So this idea of the calorie trade-off. So it is important to understand the trade-offs between being inactive and active. And our fundamental concept to keep in mind is that a calorie can only be spent once. There are only 5 ways in which a calorie can be utilized: to grow your body, maintain your body during resting metabolism, store energy as fat, engage in physical activity, or reproduce. I have no idea how true that is, but let's just take that as a rough framework for now. The way in which your body divides and prioritizes these functions is determined by various factors such as age and energetic circumstances. If you're still in the growing stage, it is likely that you won't have enough energy to reproduce, which is why animals generally start having offspring only after they have completed their growth phase, which I thought was really fascinating, how obviously genes based upon your age dictate the choices of where your body sends resources, and it kind of makes sense from like a muscle growth perspective. You send signals by obviously lifting heavy weights, tearing the muscles, which then tell your body, hey, look at me, I need you to send me resources because I'm fucked, I've been worked out, I'm struggling. And that's essentially, I guess, how your body works, right? It's just signaling. It's all about, like, is it away from the balance center it was before? Like, is a signal, like, I guess, for example, I guess when you're running, it's like, oh, we're low in oxygen, signal for breathe quicker, signal for stop muscles, if that makes sense. And that's the decision framework.
I know this is a random tangent, but it's kind of interesting that, like, why don't we have like a method of aging based on metabolism rather than going around the sun once? Because it almost seems like I don't know.
I get what you're saying. So instead of being like, he's 18 years old, it's like he's finally hit that metabolic age where he's now not in puberty. Like, because you can argue,
right? Which means that then there's probably
like a hormonal stage,
which means that there's probably a spectrum.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there where you could literally. So obviously you have this period called like adolescence, right? Puberty. That is technically in my head a period where hormones are high, right? So that's a period you could classify as different to other stages of being. And then you could probably do the same as like the early 20s. And you're probably right. You could definitely categorize, and I'm sure there must be somebody who's done something similar to this, where you can categorize life based upon like your body decision matrix, so to speak. Like,
well, I remember him talking
what is your body's priorities, right?
Yeah, and I remember him like mentioning it later. There's like a or maybe it wasn't, but you can have like a metabolic age based on like numerous factors. But like, no, it's just a random tangent, but I just thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. It's meant to slow down your metabolism over time, right? It's meant to be like you're meant to put on. So obviously, I guess people say, I don't know if how true this is, but anecdotally, people say it's easier to put on weight as you get older. And I'm wondering if that's because your metabolism slows or because your metabolism prioritizes fat storage.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Is it because your metabolism is slower, or is it because your body suddenly goes, hang on a second, we're now in this period where, I don't know, it's more about survival. Let's just store more fat. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Or maybe because you're being because you're being so sedentary, it's just sending signals of like, okay, cool, like this is what we should be doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I have no idea.
Imagine like meeting someone and like today they're like 40, tomorrow they're like 45 because they just sat on the couch for the whole day. And
so it's I think it is in this book as well that he does talk a lot about the link between activity and aging, because it's actually it's really interesting some of the points on it. I think that's enough from this perspective on the calorie trade-off. I don't think there's anything else there.
So then on to the next stage. So is being lazy a good thing? So as you sit in a chair or lie in bed reading this, feeling guilty about being inactive, take comfort in the fact that your current state of physical stillness is a time-tested basic approach to sensibly conserve limited energy. Aside from youthful inclinations to play and other social factors, the inclination to avoid unnecessary physical activity has been a sensible adaptation for countless generations. In reality, in contrast to other animals, humans may have evolved to be particularly disinclined to exercise.
I mean, look at the fact that monkeys haven't created vacuum cleaners, There is definitely something about humanity that likes to be lazy.
Literally.
And I don't know, the next part on the notes here about the word sloth, I thought was quite interesting. It was just more the origins of the word sloth and how it's come to mean lazy, and how it actually had spiritual connotations of negativity. And actually it's, we've made laziness a negative phrase, when in reality it can actually be useful. I mean, some people still spin it positively, don't they? Like, if I have a job that takes ages, I give it to a lazy person because they figure it out and solve it, if that makes sense. It's like, if I have a job that's really long-winded, give it to somebody who's lazy and he'll come up with a solution that makes it easy to do. But
that's funny. We are just so I'm just thinking about like technology now that is just, for instance, now you can be like, Amazon, turn on the light. Oh no, Alexa, turn on the light. Like, you don't even have to move anymore to do so many things. Yeah, funny.
Yeah, I try my best to. I mean, another one example would be like escalators and lifts. Like, for fuck's sake, it's just stairs. Like,
oh my god,
we could all go. If you think about it, if you literally think about it, we could all go down these stairs. But why have we chosen to do that? Because we're fucking lazy. Like, there is no other purpose for it. If you think about it, it evolved. I mean, maybe you could say it's for people who like really do struggle with weight or something, or disabilities, but then you have disabled lists for that. If you really think about it, there is no sole purpose for that other than the fact that we're fucking lazy and we can't be bothered to take the steps. Like, I mean, unless you can propose me another reason of why.
Like, I guess you could say like carrying a bag, but then you've got lifts, right? So,
but also don't buy something so heavy. I mean, fair enough if it's like something huge, but I don't know. Most people are on it don't have a fucking bag.
Oh, so, like I'm in London. Like everyone just waits. I've never been someone to wait on an escalator. I actually hate it. So I just walk up them. But like everyone does it, and I'm like, even if all of you just happen to walk at the same time, you wouldn't even have to go like at a fast rate or anything. You're just like slowly going up. Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is, when forced to walk, people will. So when there isn't an elevator, people will walk up the stairs.
That's the
nudging, when there is one, they choose it. But I can't sit here and claim I don't take them. I do. But like, if you look at it a bit like the treadmill from a perspective of why does this even exist? You realize it's because we're just trying to save energy. We're trying to save the 20 steps of energy twice a day. It's crazy. And once again, that definitely links back to this idea that, humans are inherently lazy. The fact that we've created a contraption and spend money maintaining it when you could be much cheaper to just have concrete slabs, which people just step on. And you pay that with the taxpayer money as well. So good to know.
We aren't considering we know that, like we evolved to be, I guess the myths don't, but like, we evolved to be physically active. We've now designed a society where we aren't physically active. Like our society doesn't promote it. Like even take it's a bit of a side tangent, but like think about during COVID, right? None of it was like, oh, you need to go out and get some exercise to try and prevent getting ill. Or even after COVID, it's not like there was a big emphasis on like, okay, it turns out we've got a really unhealthy population here. A third of them are obese. We need to be, a lot more physically active. You don't get that. And you won't.
That wasn't really the message, was it?
But yeah, anyway, so moving on to chapter 3, sitting. Sitting is the new smoking. So the myth is sitting is intrinsically unhealthy. So to fully grasp how our bodies have evolved to adapt to physical inactivity and activity, it is essential to comprehend the significance of sitting. If our bodies have developed to avoid unnecessary physical activity, including exercise, then how can sitting have such detrimental effects? Additionally, is it accurate that the average American spends 13 hours a day sitting? And how does this compare to the sitting habits of our ancestors? While standing may require more energy than sitting, the practice of sitting for extended periods is a widespread habit among humans and other animals due to the long-term benefits of energy conservation. Historically, people sat on the ground without the use of chairs, as furniture was not commonly used by hunter-gatherers. Today, many individuals in non-Western cultures continue to sit on the ground regularly.
I didn't take too many notes from this chapter. With the cross comparison with the hunter gatherers in this chapter, it was basically saying that they spend a decent amount of their time sat down, and also it didn't mention anything about their posture. I think you obviously there were some bits where it talked about they had a bit more active sitting.
But in general, like squatting and because there wasn't any support.
By the way, I was going to say I do think that is a big problem with the way we sit currently. I think it's amazing to see how many people can't do a squat, even with their body weight, just because we haven't. If you think about it, it's crazy. I don't know what muscles we must use. I'm gonna try and sit down now, but when they stand up, people just don't seem to be using their ass muscles to pick themselves up. I don't know what they do.
Yeah,
because people don't seem to have the leg muscles for it. Because to be fair, until I started training legs, and which was about a couple of months, 6 months ago now, my legs were so weak. I used to struggle to even do one with my body. I couldn't even balance.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is that causes us to do it.
Well, I think the interesting thing about there were a few things that I took from this chapter. So one was that when we're not active, well, there are health concerns. So there's a point here which says Prolonged sitting can raise three significant health concerns that are interrelated. The first is the lack of physical activity. When sitting for long hours, we are not engaging in any form of exercise or activity. The second concern is that extended periods of inactivity can increase the levels of sugar and fat in the bloodstream, which can be harmful to our health. Finally, the most alarming risk of prolonged sitting is the potential for our immune system to attack our bodies, which can lead to inflammation. And I thought that was interesting. Like, obviously, it's not going to, if I sit down for an hour, my body's not suddenly going to cave in on itself. But it is interesting that if we sit for long periods of time, long periods of the day after day, then essentially those three factors are going to be contributing to ill health. And I thought that was really interesting. And the second point was that realistically, it's not that sitting causes bad posture, but that we're never engaging the muscles that should be responsible for being able to get hold good posture. Right. Yeah. So you think about muscular endurance, a lot of the time, if we're like we said, that hunter gatherers squat, so they're engaging their legs, they're engaging their lower back, their glutes a lot. And so those things, if they were to sit in a chair, they'd probably be able to sit in there a lot longer before they get a bit of back pain, because they have a lot of muscular endurance to those muscles that are responsible for allowing them to sit down.
I'm starting to wonder, because obviously, we've recently we've spoken personally about this idea of, running correctly and obviously engaging the right muscles when we run. I just just been standing now and thinking, is there a correct way to stand? And that's going to sound really, really weird. But I'm standing now, right? Is tensing your bum slightly to engage your core a bit more? Because I don't know why, whenever I feel I see a chimpanzee standing, I see them sort of standing almost with their hips thrusted forward with their ass clenched. I don't know whether it's that stupid,
but that's because that's
got me into it. But I just wonder if there's a better way to stand which engages your muscles in a way that keeps correct posture. Does that make sense? Instead of because I shift from hip to hip, obviously for comfort reasons and possibly endurance or whatever. But I'm just wondering now if I because I feel stronger as soon as I engage my glutes. I feel like I'm standing and my shoulders have gone back immediately. So I'm just wondering, obviously this wasn't covered in the book, but there might be a correct way to stand, or a better way to stand.
Well, so yes and no. So I think one of the points that he was mentioning is that because of the way that we're designed, we can stand for a long period of time without burning too much, without tiring. Right. The same thing with walking. We've been designed to be able to do
bipedal,
that,
isn't it?
And expel less energy. Whereas so with chimps, because of the way that their pelvis is literally designed, it means that they have to engage more muscles and then they get tired. So I think the correct way of standing,
the whole body, isn't it? Because when they walk, so obviously walking on four legs and arms, they just they have to use everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas I think for standing then, or walking, the probably most correct way is the least exerting, in a weird way, right? If your skeleton is because if you're engaging too much,
in that case, it would have to be more direct. In my head, the more straight on you are, the less muscle you burn, because you're putting everything through the most stable part, right? The moment I start going onto one leg at a time, I'm placing all the stress of my body weight through one. So in my head, the best pose would then be a way that puts your all skeleton the points through through the strongest part, right? If that makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, sorry, we're just got an absolute tangent here. We'll come back to the activity of the chimpanzees. I think we'll finish the chapter off with that. So this part I thought was really interesting. So a 15-year study that involved over 10,000 Danish individuals did not establish any link between the time spent sitting at work and heart disease. Similarly, a larger study of 66,000 middle-aged Japanese office workers also produced similar findings. These studies indicate that mortality is more accurately predicted by the duration of sitting during leisure time. So that implies that factors such as socioeconomic status and exercising routines during mornings, evenings, and weekends have significant health implications that surpass the amount of time spent sitting at work during weekdays. And I thought that was really interesting. How actually sitting in leisure time is more important than sitting at work. But I guess it's just, that kind of makes sense. When you're not sitting, what are you doing? If you're doing more sitting, obviously it's going to be bad for you, right? It's just semantics at that point, right? It's just are you doing other stuff other than sitting all the time? That's kind of the way I see that, And obviously, are you working out, etc.? But I thought it was quite interesting how, there's actually been some research done on a large or like a decent amount of population of office workers, which shows that actually there isn't a massive link between the two. So there might be some sort of argument here that, a sedentary lifestyle is fine, sitting is fine, but obviously, once again, too much is bad. And therefore, it's like when you're not being forced to sit, if you're still sitting, you're going to run into some problems.
And you need to kind of counteract that by doing some form of physical activity.
Some form of physical activity. 100%. And then I thought this bit was quite interesting as well, because obviously I used to go to the chiropractor and everything, and I've been taught, posture on chairs is like the biggest cause for like back problems. But here we go. So the notion that slouching in chairs causes back pain is not supported by scientific evidence. People without chairs commonly adopt postures that are comfortable and don't slouch. Furthermore, numerous meta-analyses and systematic reviews have been conducted on the relationship between sitting posture and back pain. And high-quality studies have consistently failed to find a link between habitual sitting in flexed or slouched postures and back pain. In fact, there is no good evidence to support the idea that sitting for long periods or using special chairs increases the risk of back pain. The best predictor of avoiding back pain is having a strong lower back muscle, back with muscles that are resistant to fatigue. People with strong fatigue-resistant backs are more likely to have a better posture, which can help prevent back pain. And I thought that was pretty fascinating, because I don't know.
I thought that was.
I've always been drilled into me. Once again, I haven't seen these studies. We're taking Daniel Lieberman's word for it here. We like to trust that he's done what he's claimed here, which is like read the sort of systematic reviews and stuff. But it's nice to sort of see that actually some of the common beliefs around that could be, one, wrong, and two, actually one of the best ways to sort of fix bad posture is just, exercising your back. Which I think was
absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense, because I was thinking about this, was it today or yesterday or something, that recently, obviously, we've been watching those podcasts with Andy Galpin and Andrew Huberman, and the different protocols of health. But I was thinking about this. We essentially evolved to have explosive power and muscular endurance, but like in terms of like muscular wise, I think a lot of it's to do with muscular endurance, because we wouldn't be lifting a lot of heavy things, but we would be lifting some heavy things over a long period. Right. Okay. And so a lot of it is to do with muscular endurance rather than like how much weight can I lift right now. And I just thought like it ties in well with this idea that our muscles, they need to, if hunter-gatherers are probably engaging in a lot of physical activity all the time, and so they're able to withstand a lot of stress on their muscles for a long period of time. Hence why like this makes a lot of sense, I find, with the whole like if you've got a stronger lower back, better muscular endurance in your back,
especially fatigue resistant,
hold a position for a long time.
For sure. No, it does make sense. So to finish this chapter off, we're going to go back to the chimpanzees. So on average, adult male and female chimpanzees spend nearly 87% of their day engaged in sedentary activities like grooming, resting, feeding, and nesting. So during a 12-hour day, chimpanzees are physically active for almost 10.5 hours. Physically inactive, that's important, for almost 10.5 hours, with the most active days consisting of about 8 hours of rest and the least active days consisting of over 11 hours of rest. After building their nest, these sleep for approximately 12 hours until sunrise. Compared to wild chimps, even the most sedentary American couch potatoes are significantly more active. If being that'll do. But I thought that was just like a really interesting cross comparison.
Absolutely.
These guys are so lazy, but these bloody chimps are sleeping 12-hour days and having 8.5 hours of just chilling. Like it's just nuts.
No, I think a key thing that you need to take away from the book is just that we evolved for a function, for a purpose, right? All of our bodily systems have evolved to serve that purpose, and whatever that purpose is, it's different for each animal. I think cats, they sleep a ridiculous amount of time during the day. It's like 12
and
plus
then another
hours.
One is dolphins. You see the dolphins, they can semi-sleep and be awake. I don't know if you saw that.
I'm aware.
The sleep part where it's like they semi-sleep, semi-awake, and I thought it was quite like they shut off areas of their brain to sleep as they. But we do that when we micro-sleep, don't we? Or some, I guess we're totally out, but. Remember when you were really tired of that micro sleep? But I don't think you're fully
Yeah,
conscious, right? You're fully unconscious just for like 10 seconds and you're back.
You're so sleep deprived. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it just goes to show that, like, depending on, so all the like processes responsible, cats might have a different digestive tract and might require a lot more time to digest things. Cows have 3 stomachs, so they can digest certain foods that we can't. So it all goes to like, it all adds to why we've evolved in this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to say, like,
why
dogs, like we don't have tongues that can like hook up water because we don't have to drink from like pond. It's just interesting.
So all of it goes to explain why we engage in certain levels of physical activity and why we are sedentary for some of the day as well. Like, think about lions, like they just look like they're lounging around all the fucking time, like they're having, the best life. And then the female lions just go off, bring them food. It's ridiculous. But because they probably need to save up all their calories because they're in a dominant hierarchy and they fight each other. But anyway, so on to chapter 4. So sleep, why stress thwarts rest. And the myth number 4 is you need 8 hours of sleep every night. So the myth of 8 hours. In the modern world, we tend to medicalize certain behaviors by prescribing specific doses, such as a minimum of 150 minutes of physical activity per week, 25 grams of fiber per day, and 8 hours of sleep per night. However, it is unclear when and where the recommendations of 8 hours of sleep per night originated. Patterns of sleep. So a quick observation would show that there is no uniform sleeping pattern among humans or mammals. Donkeys only sleep for 2 hours a day, while armadillos sleep for as long as 20 hours a day. That is nuts, right?
2 hours a day.
Why did you even evolve? Why would you even evolve?
Well, technically, donkeys didn't evolve, did they? I thought they were like a mix between like a. Wait, am I dumb to think this? Because they're not what's the word? They're not fertile, right?
No, you're thinking mules. That's if a horse has sex with a donkey.
That's a horse and a donkey have sex. Yeah, cool.
Okay,
continue.
Yeah.
But 2 hours.
No, I was more meaning like an armadillo sleeping 20 hours of the day. Like, why are you even alive? Like, by the time that you wake up, it's time to go back to bed again. Like,
what is the point of your?
Yes. It seems hard, but
comedy sketch about that, like an animated comedy sketch. Like, back to sleep then.
Yeah.
Like, morning, Barry.
Oh, God.
Good night sleep. Yeah, fantastic. See you
You've
tomorrow.
evolved just to have a basal metabolic rate. That's it. It's like, God. Anyway, so while some animals like giraffes take frequent naps, other species have uninterrupted sleep. A few large animals, such as elephants, can nap while standing up. Moreover, some marine mammals, such as the ones that Jess talked about earlier on, in terms of the dolphins and whales, have evolved the ability to put half of their brain to sleep while swimming. On that note, do you want to know something crazy? Actually, I think it was in Why We Sleep, but basically some birds, they all sit together when they sleep, okay? And the ones on the outside will shut down the hemisphere of their brain that isn't responsible for their out-turning eye. So the eye that is on the outside of the birds. So each side, so the bird on each end has their eye open, right? But the other hemisphere is asleep.
Well, what are the ones in the middle? They want to sleep.
So they're asleep, and then what happens? Okay, is the ones on the end, they swap position, and then they sleep. The other hemisphere goes to sleep.
It's amazing how they've been calibrated to have a perception in unity, like in the fact that they know their role is to take the sides, then cover the group. I just don't understand how it works, but fair enough. It's pretty.
Maybe they just flip around. Maybe they don't move, but like they just.
I don't know,
but even
that's true,
so, like that's fucking crazy. Nuts, right?
But yeah, no, I really like this this point about this like diversity though, like it because it gives us a little like I'm not gonna say antidote, but like a different opinion from Why We Sleep, because obviously like Why We Sleep literally like hammered home how important sleep was, linked it with like every single disease under the sun, and basically said the reason why we're dying from all these things is because of our lack of sleep, right? And I remember seeing somebody try and debunk him and say like this is where he's going wrong with all his. I don't know if I sent it to you. I think I did ages ago.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Basically saying he was completely overstating. And obviously, there's this classic idea of like correlation and causation. Just because there's a correlation doesn't mean it's caused it. And I quite liked how this guy takes a bit more of a balanced approach, because I've become kind of not obsessed, but I'm sure you're the same with this Aura ring and, you know, tracking my daily sleep.
Yeah.
And I get really annoyed when I get less than 7. Like 7 for me is like the point I should be getting 7 no matter what. And there's just times where, you know, you just wake up and you're like, I'm awake. I don't know if you ever get that. And it's been like, and you might have even had like 5 hours sleep, but it's like, I am awake. And there comes a point, I think, where you actually have to just trust the feelings of your body. And like, if you feel like you're awake, you wake up. Because I'm sure, but to be honest, I'm sure most people don't have the problems we do because one, they're not tracking their sleep, and that for them that's self-explanatory. Is like, I feel awake, I'm going to wake up. But with us, we've fallen for this classic, like the point he was making there, like the medicalization of things. We have like now dosages which we think we have to hit all the time to be like optimal, so to speak. But the reality is a bit more complicated, you know.
It is really interesting. I actually have a thing on my Notion where I described, or I state whether there's a discrepancy between how I feel and what my Aura ring actually tells me, because I find that a lot of the time, like most of the time it's fine, it's accurate. It's like, okay, I feel good, or I got whatever amount of sleep. But actually the main thing I kind of look at it for is just when I fall asleep. Yeah. And then I just want to know when I fall asleep, and then I can like gauge, right?
I'll tell you something which you should be. It's like the classic, isn't it? So the classic like reductionist view. So I guess an example would be here, like, you know, I think what you're saying here, 25 grams of fiber. Okay, there's a difference between 25 grams of fiber through vegetables v 25 grams of fiber through cereals, which are high in sugar, right? It's the same thing with sleep. I've had 7 hours sleep. Fantastic. But actually, if you look at my sleeping pattern, I was awake 20 times during the night. I was in bed for 9 hours. You know, my sleep was shit. Like I barely, like, it's like looking at one metric and forgetting that actually there's more to it. And it kind of reminded me, there's a bit in the sports gene, which we'll talk about next, where he's like, people have become obsessed with genetics now, right? Where they're literally like look for genes to be like, is my son going to be the fastest into the world because he has this sprinting gene? And he's like, do you know what? Just get a fucking stopwatch and time him run. And if he beats most of the other kids, he's probably going to be pretty quick. And like, he's like, we've become so obsessed with these like minuscule like optimization things. We forget that actually sometimes the best thing is just like the common sensical approach to it. So it's like, do I feel good from sleeping? Yes. Okay, I slept well. And is he quick when he runs? Yes. Okay, it doesn't matter if he has the sprinting gene or not. He's fucking rapid. Like it's not self-explanatory. And I think sometimes you make it, and like I mean, the same with food, I guess, is like, fine, make sure you eat under 1,000 or 2,000 calories a day, but one person's eating McDonald's and eating 1,800 calories, and one of them's eating purely veg. You're just like, well, there's obviously a bloody difference. Just because you have the same number doesn't mean there's like nothing different between the two. I think sometimes we forget the context.
We hone in on certain parameters. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on. So the reality is that most biological processes are extremely diverse, and sleep is not an exception to this. Due to variations in circadian rhythm and the mechanisms that control wakefulness and sleepiness, sleeping patterns in humans are just as diverse as they are in other mammals or animals. So the absence of a consistent sleep pattern applies to populations living in areas with electric light, such as New York and Tokyo, as well as those living without electricity in the African savanna or Amazonian rainforest. Anthropologist David Sampson's 20-day study of 22 Hadza hunter-gatherers revealed a wide range of sleep activity, with someone in the camp awake at different times. Based on this, Sampson estimated that someone was awake for all but 18 minutes per night. Such variations in sleep patterns is probably adaptive from an evolutionary standpoint, given that we are most vulnerable when asleep at night. Having at least one watchful sentinel, usually an older individual, would have reduced the risks of sleeping in a world full of leopards, lions, and other humans who could harm us. And I thought, It is a good point. And I remember like he kind of touched on it in Why We Sleep, but this idea that, and I always thought this, you know, how teens or sleep later, but they wake up later. And it's almost like there has to be certain cohorts of people that don't suit, you know, we have morning larks and night owls, right? And it's like, so those people will be going
from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense that these people overlap, right? Because then they can keep guard, etc. You need variation. It would make sense to program variation into people, and to program some people to be like, so you know how there's that classic argument of like, once the sunlight goes down, you become more tired because a certain hormone builds up. I think it might be melatonin, probably butchered it.
It is, yeah.
But then some people are like unsensitive to it, which would make sense for the people who are going to stay up late.
Yeah.
And then, take watch. Because if everybody got really sleepy, then nobody would be able to stay awake. So it kind of makes sense that you have variation within those genes to do that.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah. So, and then I thought this next point was quite interesting as well. So like the UCLA sleep researcher Jerome Siegel and his colleagues conducted a study that was particularly intriguing. They fitted wearable sensors on 10 Hadza hunter-gatherers from Tanzania, 30 sand forager farmers from the Kalahari Desert, and 54 hunter farmers from the Amazon rainforest in Bolivia, none of whom had access to electricity, clocks, or the internet. Despite this, Siegel was surprised to discover that they slept less than industrialized people. During warmer months, these foragers slept for an average of 5.7 to 6.5 hours per day, and during colder months, they slept for an average of 6.6 to 7.1 hours per night. Furthermore, they seldom took naps. And I just thought that was interesting because we've been sort of told to believe that we're having this like lack of sleep epidemic, and we don't sleep enough. I personally think, from my experience with sleep, I think what it does is it fucks the quality of your sleep rather than the length. That's what I've noticed with technology. Like I'm getting the times right with my sleeping. Like I'm getting mostly my 7 hours or whatever. But I find sometimes I'm still tired, and there's a level of restfulness. Like I don't sleep well at night, and in my head there's only one real sort of thing. Is this idea of the sort of lights coming in before bedtime, etc. Right? So I think that's the big problem. It's more like, for example, they've done a good thing to like measure their length of sleep, but it still doesn't take into account the quality of their sleep. They probably slept really well for 6 hours, and that's why they're like, fantastic. Whereas some people, I can sleep for 6 hours, and if it's a terrible night's sleep as well, I'm in trouble.
No, it's true. I have, because there have been numerous times where I've slept for like 6 hours and I feel fucking great. Sometimes better than when I've slept 8 hours, and it is just I would love to know.
There's no rhyme or reason sometimes with it, right? That's part of the bit that bothers me. There's no like, you're right. Some days I look at it, I'll be like, oh my god, I only got 5 hours and a half, but I'm feeling so fresh and ready to go. And then some days I get like 8 hours, I'm like, oh wow, smashed it, but I'm like so lethargic. I'm just like, what have I done to myself? Have I slept too much? And then there was
that's
in
the
the
thing,
past I
like,
used to be able to sleep like 10 hours. I remember times when I used to be able to sleep forever. And now I can't. I don't know about you, but I can't get past like 9 a.m.
I've never been someone who can really like sleep in, but I find what is difficult is like if let's say you have like a really good night's sleep or a really bad night's sleep, and you try and figure out why, and there's just so many fucking factors. It's like, oh, did I eat too late? Did I exercise too late? When did I exercise? Did I exercise at all? Like, what foods did I eat? Do they like correspond to sleep or not?
Noise that woke you up and you didn't even realize because you obviously weren't conscious when the noise was made. Sleeping with a partner as well, like them like potentially moving, like then you move and you wake up.
Yeah,
there's so many different,
so many. So I'll read this point here. So the uncomfortable sleeping of the past. So the disorderly sleeping conditions of the Stone Age may seem counterproductive to a good night's sleep from a modern perspective, but anthropologist Carol Worthman suggests that the opposite could be as true. As we begin to enter the initial stages of NREM sleep, our awareness of the environment gradually decreases. This process of gradually tuning out might be beneficial because our brain is monitoring our surrounding as we fall asleep, potentially to elevate if it is safe to sleep. Evaluate if it is safe to sleep. The slow disappearance of sounds like friends and family talking, a crackling fire, crying infants, and the fact that hyenas are far away signal to the brain that it is secure to enter deeper stages of unconscious sleep. Ironically, by insulting ourselves so effectively from these comforting stimuli, we may be making ourselves more susceptible to experiencing sleep-related stress. Which is quite interesting, isn't it?
It's an interesting perspective for sure. Like once again, it's a very hard hypothesis to like test.
Yeah, of course.
But it kind of makes sense that some form of noisy background would create this idea of like, I don't know, it gives you a backdrop to hear
comfort.
Sounds, I guess, or comfort. Yeah, I guess a lot of people like that sort of white noise to sleep, don't they, and stuff. So
Yeah, well, I wonder if it like conveys
It's rare
an element of safety, right? Like if you know that people
Yeah,
are
but it's-
around you.
I just think in the past it was rare to ever find an area that was completely quiet as well, or like as quiet
Yeah,
as
you
the
probably would
environments
never.
we find
Yeah.
ourselves in today. Whether or not
Like I put
that,
on the nature
that
sounds,
sleep.
you know.
Yeah. I used to love like raining sounds and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Whether or not this is actually true, it's just like an interesting idea to ponder over because you know that the evolutionary logic would make that the case, if that makes sense. A bit like how we were talking earlier about using logic of what would they do in the past. It's similar to that. It's like if this is the case, then that would make sense.
Yeah.
But yeah. So next we have. I thought this was quite interesting. We will just touch on it. Why not? So the regulation of the sleeping system. So the regulation of wakefulness and sleep involves two main biological processes that interact within the brain. Normally, these processes ensure that we wake up feeling refreshed in the morning, stay alert through the day, and fall asleep peacefully at night. But when they are disrupted, we may nap inappropriately, struggle to fall asleep at night, wake up too early, or experience sleepless nights. So the first process is our circadian rhythm. So this is a cycle that lasts about 24 hours and is regulated by a group of cells in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Chiasmatic nucleus, yeah.
I think that's yeah. These cells stimulate the production of cortisol, a hormone that promotes wakefulness in the morning. And as night falls, the hypothalamus directs the pineal gland to produce melatonin, a hormone that induces sleep. The circadian rhythm is synchronized daily by environmental cues such as light, which can reset it gradually by about an hour per day. However, relying solely on the circadian rhythm to regulate sleep would be problematic. For this reason, the regulation of our sleep-wake states is influenced by a second system that is closely tied to activity levels. And I thought this is quite interesting just because I haven't really heard of this secondary system before, and it would make sense that your body would give you a secondary sort of like, not like an override, but something else that would influence it.
Absolutely.
This system is called the homeostatic system, which functions like an hourglass that measures how long we've been awake, gradually building up pressure for us to sleep. As we remain awake, the accumulation of molecules such as adenosine left behind when the brain uses energy increases our sleep pressure. When we sleep, particularly during NREM sleep, we reset the hourglass. So the homeostatic static system helps balance the time we spend awake versus asleep. And if you're awake for too long, it will eventually take over our circadian rhythm system and help us make up for lost sleep time. If I remember correctly, I think it's adenosine that caffeine binds to inhibits. I don't know if you remember.
It's an adenosine blocker.
Yeah, and that's why
caffeine,
they advise not to take it first thing in the morning, caffeine. Because it stops up that natural build up. In fact, it doesn't stop the natural build up. It blocks your sensitivity to the build up, and then when it hits you, you're like, oh crap, I'm really tired.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that's quite
exactly. It is, and it's like
makes sense that your body would, clock how long you've been awake, because otherwise you could, without the other cues of light, like let's just say I don't know, if you're living in a place which is light 20 hours of the day, the melatonin is not going to kick in, so you need something else which is just going to knock you out.
No, that's a good point actually. And I wonder, because if you go during winter or summer really far up north, well then you do get pretty much sunlight 24 hours of the day. Same with like when it's in winter, it's like you don't get any sun. God, it must be such a strange place to live in.
Well, there's not many people who live there naturally, isn't it?
I don't think so.
There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the next point. So the sleep industrial complex. So the sleep industry, also known as the sleep industrial complex, has taken advantage of people's concerns about their sleep, persuading them to spend a considerable amount of money on various high-tech devices like noise-canceling headphones, light-blocking curtains, and specialized mattresses. Although these gadgets may seem amusing to our ancestors who slept on the ground, the excessive use of sleeping pills is a cause for alarm. These highly addictive pills are a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the number of prescriptions in the United States has increased more than threefold since 1998, not counting over-the-counter medications. While it's important to acknowledge that many people suffer from sleep deprivation and its negative consequences, we must also consider the evolutionary and anthropological context of sleep. Some people tend to exaggerate the extent to which modern sleep patterns are abnormal, similarly to how sitting has been demonished. demonized. Sorry. This fear mongering can be profitable, and our society has a tendency to judge physical activity and inactivity behaviors. However, both sitting and sleeping are natural and common behaviors that vary greatly based on environmental and cultural factors and have complex advantages and drawbacks. And I think that's a good point. Like, our culture does impact how much we think it is right to sleep or how we should sleep. And it's a good point, the whole sleeping pill thing, because obviously like they said, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And, we have a sleep crisis, I would say, in the West. And it's funny that going off your point that, now we use like Aura, or we use Apple Fitness, and it tells us how much we're getting, and if we're not getting it, then we're stressing about it, and so then it's almost ironically creates another path towards seeking extra help or seeking, I don't know, sleeping pills, because we think that we're not getting the right sleep.
But once again, it's another classic example of like the fact that science and medicalization provides anxiety, because what it does is it gives you a one-stop shop for what you should be getting, and then when you don't get it, you feel anxious. It's like
exactly
the most optimal amount you can get of sleep is 8 hours, and it has to be I remember why we sleep is something like a certain percentage NREM, a certain percentage REM, and obviously Aura tracks that for you. And I sometimes look at it and go, Jesus Christ, I didn't get any deep sleep last night. And to be honest, I usually feel it, but it's this idea that I now feel.
For me, it's REM.
But like the point being, they've convinced us as well that these things these goalposts have to be hit like daily. And then you feel anxious about it, and it's just interesting because by creating these benchmarks, they actually create a market for solutions that help people hit the benchmarks. Like they give you anxiety when you're not hitting them, because they're like, no, exactly. If you're not hitting them, you're giving yourself health problems. But it's like, unfortunately, with just the way the world is, you're always going to have variety, which is why your body has built-in systems that help balance it. Like the whole point of like the circadian rhythm and this other system is like tracking how long you've been awake. If I was really sleep deprived, I would be falling asleep because the adenosine would have built up so much and said to me, you can't function anymore. Fair enough. Some days I feel tired. Doesn't everybody? Some days I feel energetic. So does everybody else. It's part of the natural variation of life to a degree. Like, I don't think you can ever fully, control the factors which go into that, because like you said, there's so many different things that can affect your sleep.
Absolutely. And
the noise, you can't control somebody driving past with a bloody motorcycle outside your window. You can soundproof a room, but you've got to go crazy.
Exactly. And these benchmarks that they put forward, they're deprived of context, right? So you're saying that I need to get this percentage of REM every night, for every night that I'm alive. I don't think so, right? Like it doesn't take into consideration context. And so,
I think it's one of those things that they need to have like a part where they say, these are the guidelines. If you hit these markers, you're probably going to be good. In fact, funny enough, the next point actually kind of hits on this actually. So let's just go into it. So diagnosing your own sleep health. If you are unsure about your own sleep health, sleep researchers suggest you ask yourself these 5 simple questions. So, are you satisfied with your sleep? Do you stay awake all day without dozing? Are you asleep between 2 and 4 a.m.? Do you spend less than 30 minutes awake at night? And do you get between 6 and 8 hours of sleep? And if your answers to these questions are usually or always, then you should sleep contently knowing that you're generally getting enough sleep. And I think that's like for me at least, that was quite sobering, because I was like, do you know what? In the grand scheme of things, I think I'm not getting the best sleep. But that's because some days I wake up tired.
Yeah.
But in the grand, am I feeling so tired that I can't do stuff? No. So it's just like, I'm just feeling some form of fatigue that's related to, maybe not sleeping as well as I could have. And it's funny because these benchmarks that have been set now make us feel guilty or anxious for just, I don't know, for just the natural variation of life, right? And it's interesting because this happens not just for like the sleep industrial complex, so to speak. It happens for all markets really, to a degree. Even the medical markets, like we're saying, the medicalization of exercise and stuff. It's, you should be having this many supplements a day. You should be getting this much vitamin D in your diet. You should get this percentage of potassium. little did they not say to you that, if you just eat a normal diet, you'll tick all these boxes. But instead you have to buy a vitamin supplement, it's anxiety generating by basically telling people this is what you should be doing. It's like a law, isn't it? Like this is what society should do, and then you feel anxious whenever you're anywhere apart from at that point.
Well, they create a normal, and then if you don't reach that, then like you said, it creates a kind of.
And on that note, because we're finishing up now, but I'm excited for the rest of these fitness books because we're going to get into other stuff like good calories, bad calories, and talking about like the reason why calories aren't the be all end all of fitness and nutrition as well. So I'm really excited to get into that too because it's been pretty eye opening, this book. And I think
it's been really good.
The next topics are part 2 is about speed, strength, and power. So we'll be discussing humanity's speed in comparison to other animals, as well as if we were born to be speedy or high in endurance, and why we can't be both, or if we can be both. And then we go more onto trying to think what the next parts after that are. So endurance, isn't it? And strength, yes, and aging. So we're probably only about a third of the way through this. So if you enjoyed that, like, subscribe, and we'll be doing the second one probably within the next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
That's a wrap.
Sweet. Hey guys, well there you have it. We hope you enjoyed that book summary. Now we know it can be a lot to take in all at once, so if you want to be able to read this in a more palatable size, or you want to be able to implement any of those key actionable ideas that we were talking about in this episode, head on over to our website at wisewords.blog, where the book summary will be waiting for you. Also, don't forget to check out our socials as we consistently upload the key ideas, benefits, and actionable ideas from all the books that we read. The links to those will be in the description below. Now, we want to be able to get you the best content in a way that's really easy to understand, but we need your help. Your opinion matters. So you are our feedback mechanism. And with those quick actions, whether that's leaving us a like or a dislike, commenting in the comment section below, or subscribing to our channel, all of those help us gauge what we're doing well and how to improve on our method of delivery. So if you have any thoughts on the matter, don't hesitate to act. It takes less than 10 seconds and it really helps us out. But with all that being said, until next time, stay wise.